With a cold heart, my husband signed the consent form to take me off life support. The doctor had said I still had a chance. When I suddenly awoke, the moment I opened my eyes, I whispered a single sentence that made the doctor turn pale and immediately call the police. Before the story begins, please drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you even more compelling stories. Darkness. That was all I could see as far as my eyes could reach, or more accurately, as far as my consciousness could grope. It felt like sinking to the bottom of the deepest ocean, a place where sunlight never touches. My body felt impossibly heavy, as if a 1,000-ton slab of concrete was crushing my chest, my legs, my arms. I wanted to move. I wanted to scream, but not a single muscle in my body would obey my brain's command. I was trapped, imprisoned within my own flesh. However, my sense of hearing was extraordinarily sharp. Far sharper than when I was fully conscious. I could hear the hum of the ventilator pumping air into my lungs with a monotonous, terrifying rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of the heart monitor became the only sign that I was still alive, that my soul had not yet abandoned this powerless body. "How is she, Dr. Evans?" That voice. My blood boiled the instant I heard it. It was Rick, my husband. His tone was so sad, so fragile, as if he were the most suffering husband in the world about to lose his beloved wife. But I knew exactly what kind of demonic grin he was likely hiding behind that pitiful facade. "Her vitals are stable, Mr. Henderson, though Eleanor is still in a coma," Dr. Evans replied. "My colleague at Lakeside General Hospital." Dr. Evans's voice sounded weary but firm. I could picture the frown on his forehead as he checked the charts on the monitor. "As I mentioned yesterday, there's a window to perform a decompressive craniotomy to relieve the pressure on her brain. Her pupillary response is still present, though weak. That's hope, Rick." I wanted to scream, "Yes, do the surgery! Michael, help me!" But my tongue was useless. My throat felt like it was stuffed with thick cotton. I screamed with all my might inside my head, but no sound escaped, only torturous silence. "Surgery." Rick let out a long sigh, a sigh that sounded so fabricated to my ears. "Dr. Evans, we've been over this. Eleanor, my wife, has suffered enough. I can't bear to see her head cut open again, with tubes stuck in her here and there. Is there a 100% guarantee she'll return to normal?" In medicine, there's no such thing as a 100% guarantee, Rick. But without the surgery, the risk is fatal. "We're racing against the clock," Dr. Evans urged. I could hear the frustration in his voice. Michael was a brilliant doctor. He knew I could be saved. He knew I was a fighter. "No, Doc," Rick cut in quickly. His voice turned a fraction colder, but he immediately masked it with a fake sob. "I know my wife. She's a perfectionist. She would never want to live as a vegetable, burdening others for the rest of her life. Besides, in our family, we believe we have to respect God's will. If it's Eleanor's time to go, I have to let her go." "Liar," I shrieked in my mind. "You're just afraid I'll wake up and expose everything. Rick, you're terrified I'll tell the police that you were the one who pushed me down the stairs. You're afraid your gambling debts will be exposed." I remembered the incident with perfect clarity, as if it had happened 5 minutes ago. A torrential rain was hammering Chicago that night, just like the rain I could now faintly hear tapping against my hospital room window. We had a massive fight on the second floor of our luxurious Lincoln Park brownstone. I had just found suspicious bank statements. The money in our daughter Lily's college fund was gone. Tens of thousands of dollars vanished overnight. When I confronted him, Rick, who always appeared dapper and gentle in public, transformed into a monster. His handsome face, the one people always praised as the ideal husband, turned crimson with rage. He was no longer the Rick I knew. He was a cornered addict. "Stay out of my business, Eleanor. You're just my wife. Your job is to shut up and make money," he had snarled. "That's Lily's future, Rick. What did you use it for? Sports betting again? Your crypto scams?" I screamed back. He didn't answer with words, but with a hard shove. I lost my balance. My body was airborne for a second before my back slammed against the steps and my head hit the cold marble with a sickening crack. The last thing I remembered before darkness swallowed me was Rick standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at me not with remorse, but with a calculating stare. He didn't rush to help me. He stood there, waiting, making sure I wasn't still breathing. And now he was standing by my bedside, playing the part of the grieving husband. "Rick, I'm begging you, reconsider. As Eleanor's colleague, I know she's a strong woman. She would want to fight," Dr. Evans pleaded again. I could feel Michael's warm hand touch my wrist, checking my pulse. The touch gave me a small comfort in the midst of this cold despair. "Enough, doctor!" Rick's voice rose, then dropped again, as if reining in his emotions. "I'm her husband. I have the right to decide. I've already discussed it with my mother, and we agree. We don't want Eleanor to suffer any longer. Please, respect our family's decision. Just pull the plug." Pull the plug. The words echoed in my head like a death sentence. He wanted to murder me legally. He wanted to finish what he failed to do on those stairs. I sensed another person in the room. A cloying perfume, the scent of gardenias, far too strong. It was my mother-in-law, Brenda. "Doctor," Brenda's voice was sharp and piercing. "My son is right. This is Eleanor's fate." Perhaps this is a warning because she was too busy with her career, forgetting her duties as a wife. Don't prolong my son's suffering. Having to go back and forth to the hospital to watch over a wife who is already a lost cause. Just let her go. My heart shattered into a million pieces. Not just my husband, but my mother-in-law also wanted me dead. They were conspiring. In their eyes, I wasn't a person. I was a walking ATM that was now broken and needed to be thrown away. "Very well." Dr. Evans's voice sounded defeated. My heart sank. "If that's the family's final decision, and you've signed the DNR and refusal of medical intervention forms, we can't force the surgery. We will proceed with extubation, removing the breathing tube as per your request." "When can it be done?" Rick asked. There was a hint of impatience in his voice. He was in a hurry. "We can prepare for it now. Nurse Jenny will get the procedure ready," Michael answered quietly. "No, not now. God, please help me. I don't want to die. I have to save Lily. I have to save my assets from these leeches. I have to tell the world who Rick really is." I summoned every ounce of my strength. I focused on the tip of my toe, on my eyelid, on anything that could possibly move. "Move, Eleanor, move!" I commanded my own body. But nothing. My body remained still, a lifeless piece of meat. A coldness crept up from my feet. Not the cold of the room, but the cold fear of impending death. I heard footsteps approach. The smell of Rick's expensive cologne mixed with the faint scent of stale cigarette smoke was near my face. He leaned down, bringing his lips to my ear. "Sorry, honey," he whispered, so softly I was sure Michael and Nurse Jenny couldn't hear. "When you're gone, your insurance policy pays off all my debts. You're finally useful." Those words set my soul on fire. An incredible rage exploded in my chest, hotter than fire, stronger than fear. He wanted to kill me for insurance money. He called me useful only when I was dead. Bastard. That fury triggered something in my brain. Adrenaline flooded my dormant nervous system. My heart began to race. Beep, 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 beep. My heart monitor started beeping faster and faster. "Doctor, the patient's heart rate is spiking," Nurse Jenny exclaimed. "Eleanor?" Michael called out. In that darkness, I fought. I clawed at the walls of this paralysis with the nails of my rage. I will not die today, not at the hands of this man. The accelerating heart monitor became the soundtrack to my struggle. Beep, 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 beep. Its rhythm was chaotic, matching the explosive turmoil in my chest. I was no longer a passive patient. I was a cornered tigress, ready to pounce on anyone who threatened her life. "What's wrong with it? Why is it making that sound?" Rick's voice was panicked. Not panicked with worry, but with fear. He was afraid his plan was unraveling at the last second. "It's a sympathetic response, Doctor," Evans explained, his voice moving closer. I felt his hand checking my eyelids, shining a penlight into my pupils. A blinding light pierced the darkness. It was painful, but it was also hope. There's a sudden surge in brain activity. Eleanor might be feeling pain or a strong emotion. "What emotion? She's in a coma," Brenda snapped. Her voice was shrill with displeasure. "Come on, Doc. Don't give us false hope. Just pull it now so she can be at peace." "We can't perform the procedure when the patient is unstable, ma'am," Nurse Jenny stated firmly. I recognized my friend's voice. "Jenny, thank you for defending me." I focused all my remaining energy on one point: my eyes. My eyelids felt as heavy as iron, sealed shut with an invisible superglue, but I didn't care. The hatred for Rick and Brenda was a fuel far more potent than any stimulant. I pictured Lily's face, my little girl who still needed her mother. If I died now, Lily would be raised by these monsters. Rick would blow through my inheritance on gambling, and Lily would be neglected. No, that couldn't happen. Open. Open your eyes, Eleanor. With a single, ragged breath that felt like it was tearing my chest apart, I forced my eyelid muscles to work. Slowly, the white light of the ICU room began to filter in, blurry, blinding. Everything was a hazy, unfocused shape. "Doctor, look!" Nurse Jenny cried out. I blinked once. Twice. The shapes in front of me began to sharpen. A face. Michael's worried face was directly above mine. Behind him stood Jenny, her hand over her mouth, her eyes welling up with tears. And in the corner, I saw them. Rick and Brenda. Rick's face turned ashen instantly, white as a sheet. His eyes widened, as if he were seeing a ghost rising from the grave. He took an unconscious step back, bumping into the IV pole and making it sway. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. The grieving husband mask he had been wearing shattered, replaced by an expression of pure horror. He knew I had heard his final whisper. Brenda was frozen, her hands clutching her expensive leather handbag. The old woman's face tensed, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. "Eleanor, can you hear me?" Michael asked, his voice trembling with emotion. He leaned closer. I tried to answer, but my throat was parched. The ventilator tube was lodged in my mouth, making me want to gag. It was painful. I could only manage a weak groan. Easy, Eleanor. Easy. You're still on the ventilator. Don't fight the machine," Michael instructed gently. He looked at Jenny. "Prepare for ventilator weaning. She's fully conscious. We'll try to extubate now if her spontaneous breathing is adequate." Rick suddenly stepped forward, trying to regain control despite the fear etched on his face. "Wait, doctor. Is she really conscious? Or is this just a reflex before she passes? You know, they say there's a final rally before the end, right? How vile you are, Rick. Even as I open my eyes, you still hope for my death." Michael turned to Rick with a sharp glare I had never seen before. "Mr. Henderson," your wife opened her eyes and made direct, purposeful eye contact. "This is not a reflex. This is consciousness." The process of removing the ventilator tube was agonizing. It felt like a long snake being pulled from deep inside my lungs. I coughed violently, my chest burning. Tears streamed from the corners of my eyes. Nurse Jenny deftly cleared the mucus from my mouth and fitted an oxygen mask over my face. "Breathe, Eleanor." Slowly, Michael guided. I greedily inhaled the pure oxygen. My lungs ached, but that pain was proof that I was alive. I stared hard at Rick, a look that sent a clear message. The war has just begun. Rick looked restless. He fumbled in his pants pocket, perhaps for his phone or cigarettes, or just for an escape. "Honey, thank God you're awake," he said, his voice sounding completely off-key. He tried to approach and take my hand. I weakly jerked my hand away, rejecting his touch. Disgusting. His skin felt like poison. "Eleanor?" Rick looked startled by my rejection. I looked at Michael. I had to tell him now, before Rick had a chance to manipulate the situation or hurt me again when no one was around. My voice was a hoarse whisper, barely audible, like sandpaper on wood. "Doctor," I managed to call out. Michael immediately brought his ear close to my lips. "Yes, Eleanor. Take your time. What hurts?" I gathered my last bit of breath. I glanced at Rick, who was watching me warily. He was leaning in, trying to eavesdrop. "Keep him away," I hissed, flicking my eyes toward Rick. Michael understood. He held up a hand, signaling for Rick to back off. "Please give us some space, Mr. Henderson." Rick retreated reluctantly, his eyes never leaving me. Cold sweat began to bead on his temples. I grabbed the collar of Michael's scrubs, forcing him even closer, so close that only he could hear my whisper. This was the key to Rick's downfall. This was my real life insurance policy. "Phone," I whispered, my voice breaking. "In locker 303, the residence lounge." Michael frowned, confused but listening intently. "The code." I swallowed hard. My throat was raw. "His mother's death date." I glanced at Rick. Rick didn't know his own mother's death date because he didn't care. But he used that date as his ATM pin because it was the only date he'd ever bothered to record from his father's old journal, the day he got his first inheritance. Ironic. Michael froze. He slowly pulled his face back and looked deep into my eyes. He saw the seriousness and the fear there. He was a neurosurgeon. He was brilliant. He immediately understood that this was not the rambling of a post-coma patient. This was a distress signal. Michael's face, which had been full of medical concern, turned pale. He realized the implications of what I had said: a hidden phone, a secret code, a patient's terror of her own husband. Michael straightened up, trying to remain professional, though his hands trembled slightly. He looked at Rick, his gaze now filled with suspicion. "Nurse Jenny," Michael called, his voice deliberately flat. "Please watch over Mrs. Henderson. Don't let anyone near her, including family, without my permission. I need to get a special medication from the pharmacy for a moment." "But Doc, I'm her husband," Rick protested, his tone rising with panic. His criminal instincts were sensing danger. "Post-coma observation protocol, Mr. Henderson. The patient needs absolute quiet, or she could have a seizure," Michael lied smoothly. He patted Jenny's shoulder, giving her a look that only two people who had worked together for years could understand. Protect her. Michael turned and walked quickly out of the ICU room. I saw him reach into the pocket of his white coat, pulling out his own cell phone. His fingers danced across the screen. He wasn't calling the pharmacy. I knew he was calling someone far more important right now: the police. Rick watched Michael leave with unease, then his eyes returned to me. That look was no longer one of love or grief, but the look of a predator realizing its prey has just escaped its jaws, and now the hunter has become the hunted. I managed a faint smile behind my oxygen mask. "You're finished, Rick." The atmosphere in the room grew quiet, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, charged stillness before a storm, as thick as the air under dark clouds before lightning strikes. After Dr. Evans's back disappeared through the door, the tension in the room multiplied. I was still lying weakly, half my life seemingly dragged back from the grave, while the other half fought to stay grounded in the real world. Nurse Jenny stood guard by my bed, her posture defensive. She wasn't just a nurse to me right now. She was the last fortress protecting me from the two predators standing near the foot of my bed, Rick and his stepmother, Brenda. Yes, Brenda was Rick's stepmother, the woman who had married his father for his money and raised Rick to worship material wealth. They both stared at me. Rick with a restlessness he couldn't hide, his foot tapping an anxious, irritating rhythm on the hospital's vinyl floor. His eyes darted around the room, occasionally glancing toward the door where Michael had left, then back to me with an unreadable expression, a mix of fear and deep-seated hatred. "What's taking Dr. Evans so long?" Rick grumbled, breaking the silence. His voice sounded hoarse. He glanced at his fake Rolex, a high-end replica he used to impress his business clients. "He just went to the pharmacy. Should have been 5 minutes." "The central pharmacy might be busy, sir. There were a lot of accident victims from the storm outside," Nurse Jenny answered calmly, though I could see her hands were clenched into tight fists at her sides. Jenny knew something was wrong. Jenny knew Michael hadn't gone to the pharmacy. I tried to regulate my breathing behind the oxygen mask. Every inhale felt like sucking in razor blades, sharp and painful. But the pain kept me conscious. My mind drifted to the phone. An old, beat-up burner phone I had hidden 3 months ago. I had already sensed Rick's rotten behavior back then. Money in our joint account started disappearing. Then the bruises began to appear on my body, always in places covered by clothing. Rick was clever in his abuse. He never hit my face, because as a doctor, I had to see patients. He hit my upper arms, thighs, or stomach parts I could hide beneath my proud white coat. I had bought that used phone from a small shop on the outskirts of Chicago, using cash so it couldn't be traced. That's where I stored everything: recordings of our fights, photos of the bruises I took secretly in the hospital bathroom, and a video of Rick's confession when he was drunk, a video where he bragged about his insurance plan. I hid it in locker 303, a locker in the old, rarely used residence lounge, because the lock was jammed and it was in a damp corner. Only I knew how to open it with a specific jolt. "I'm stepping out for a minute," Rick said suddenly, walking toward the door. My heart felt like it stopped. Did he know? Could he guess? Rick was cunning. His criminal instincts were sharp. If he followed Michael and found he wasn't at the pharmacy, he would know I had leaked something. He could become desperate. "I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson." Jenny's voice was sharp, halting Rick in his tracks. "Dr. Evans instructed that you remain here. We may need immediate family consent if Mrs. Henderson's condition declines again." Rick turned, his face flushed red. "I need a smoke. I'm stressed seeing my wife like this. Who are you to stop me? You're just a nurse." "I'm following the orders of the attending physician," Jenny retorted, equally fierce. "And they're sterilizing the corridor right now due to an infectious patient transfer. You can't go out for the next 10 minutes. A lie." Jenny was lying to hold him here. I wanted to thank her, but I could only blink weakly. Brenda snorted. She walked closer to my bed. The cloying scent of her gardenia perfume made my stomach turn. She looked down at me with a condescending glare, as if I were dirt on her expensive shoes. "You see what you've done, Eleanor?" she hissed, her voice low but clear enough for me to hear. "You're inconveniencing everyone. If you were a good wife, you wouldn't be putting your husband through this stress. You should have just died peacefully." Tears of rage welled in the corners of my eyes. This woman, she knew how depraved her stepson was, but she turned a blind eye for the monthly allowance Rick gave her, money he had stolen from my savings. Suddenly, Rick seemed to realize something. His eyes widened. He looked at me, then at the door. His face turned deathly pale. Maybe he remembered the time I caught him rummaging through my purse, looking for evidence. Maybe he realized my whisper wasn't just a complaint of pain. "Move!" Rick shoved Jenny's shoulder forcefully, causing my friend to stumble into a medicine cart. The clash of metal broke the tension. "Sir, don't get physical," Jenny shouted. "You're hiding something," Rick yelled, his panic peaking. He no longer cared about the grieving husband act. "Evans isn't at the pharmacy, is he?" "What did you tell him, Eleanor?" "What?" Rick lunged toward me, his large hands gripping the bed rail. His enraged face was just inches from mine. The smell of cigarettes and cold sweat emanated from him. I saw the murderer in his eyes. He wanted to choke me. He wanted to silence me forever before the police arrived. "Answer me," he roared, shaking the bed rail. My heart monitor shrieked as my heart rate skyrocketed. Beep, 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 beep. "Security!" Jenny screamed at the top of her lungs, pressing the emergency button on the wall. Rick panicked. He knew his time was up. He let go of the bed rail and ran for the exit. He had to stop whatever Michael was doing. He had to erase the evidence. But as the automatic door slid open, Rick's escape came to an abrupt halt. In the doorway, 2 burly security guards were already blocking the path, and behind them, out of breath but with a triumphant look on his face, stood Dr. Michael Evans. In his hand, he held an object that made Rick's knees buckle instantly. An old, black burner phone with a cracked screen. My Pandora's box. The storm outside seemed to be raging, furiously beating against the ICU window in rhythm, with the tempest now erupting inside the room. A flash of lightning illuminated Rick's face, now as white as paper. He took a step back, his legs unsteady, as if his bones had been ripped from his body. Dr. Evans walked in, followed by 2 men in plain clothes whose aura of authority was unmistakable. Detectives. Michael didn't look at Rick. He walked straight to me and placed the old phone on the bedside table, as if presenting a trophy. The phone was sealed in a clear plastic evidence bag. "What is the meaning of this?" Brenda's voice screeched, breaking the tense silence. She tried to maintain her arrogance, though her eyes betrayed her panic. "Why are you stopping my son? And what is that piece of junk?" One of the detectives, a middle-aged man in a rain-dampened brown leather jacket, stepped forward. "Detective Miller," he introduced himself. I'd seen him handle forensic cases at the hospital before, Mr. Rick Henderson. Detective Miller's voice was deep and firm. We've received a report of suspected attempted murder and domestic violence. We need you to remain where you are. Slander! Rick shouted, his voice cracking. Beads of sweat the size of corn kernels ran down his temples. This is all my wife's doing. She's crazy, officer. She's hallucinating from the coma. The drugs have damaged her brain. Michael looked at Rick coldly. Eleanor's brain is functioning perfectly fine, Rick. Fine enough to remember the passcode for this phone. Michael picked up the phone, still in its plastic sleeve, and turned it on. The screen glowed dimly, displaying a password field. The date your biological mother died, Michael said flatly. Rick was silent. He swallowed hard. It was his little secret. His mother had died of a long illness because they couldn't afford treatment, long before his father became wealthy and remarried Brenda. Rick had always blamed their poverty for her death, which was why he became obsessed with money. And that date, ironically, became the code for all his criminal activities, a twisted reminder of why he did what he did. Michael typed in the numbers. The 5th of April 2098. Click. The phone unlocked. The small beep of the unlocking sound was like a bomb detonating in Rick's ears. Michael tapped the screen a few times, opened a folder named Evidence, and connected the phone to a small, portable speaker he had brought with him. Let's have a listen, Michael said. The first audio file played. There was a rustling sound, and then Rick's voice, clear and venomous, filled the ICU. Sign it or die, Eleanor. Sign these asset transfer papers now. Then came the sharp sound of a slap and my muffled cry. When you're gone, I get the insurance payout. $2 million, Eleanor. That's more than enough to pay off my gambling debts and live comfortably with my mother. So, what's it going to be? Die slowly, or sign it now? Brenda's face went slack. She covered her mouth, her eyes wide as she stared at the old phone. The proof was irrefutable. Rick's voice, his malevolent tone, the mention of his mother, it was all laid bare. That's a deep fake. Rick tried to deny it, but his voice had no strength. He backed away slowly toward the window, his eyes wildly searching for an impossible escape. With AI now? That's got to be a fabrication. Eleanor is a neurosurgeon. She's brilliant. She must have framed me. A fabrication? Michael raised an eyebrow. He tapped the screen again. What about this video? The video played. The small phone screen was aimed so the detectives could see. It was the video I had secretly recorded from a crack in the closet while Rick was on the phone with someone, likely his bookie. In the video, Rick was pacing, his face furious. Don't worry, man. My wife is taken care of. The stairs in our house get slippery when wet. A little push. Berets. Domestic accident. The cops will never suspect a thing. The payout comes through next week. I promise. The video ended. Silence. Only the steady beep of my heart monitor served as a silent witness to the downfall of a monster. Detective Miller signaled to his partner. Cuff him. Wait. No. Mom, help me, Rick. Rick screamed hysterically as the officers moved in on him. He struggled, kicking like a child, throwing a tantrum. This is a misunderstanding. Eleanor's the crazy one. She fell on her own. You have the right to remain silent, the officer said, twisting Rick's arm behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs locking around his wrists was more beautiful than any symphony I had ever heard. Rick was dragged past my bed. His eyes met mine. There was no arrogance left, only pure terror. I stared straight at him. Then, with what little strength I had, I slowly raised my right hand. My fingers moved weakly, pointing toward the door. Get out. You're a demon, Eleanor! A demon! Rick shrieked as he was hauled out the door. His voice echoed down the hospital corridor before finally fading away. Brenda was still standing frozen. She looked at me, then at the door where her stepson had been taken, without saying a word. No apology, no remorse. She turned and walked briskly out of the room, the sound of her heels clicking with an arrogant yet empty sound. She chose to save her own reputation rather than defend the son who had just been exposed as a criminal. My body suddenly felt limp. The adrenaline that had sustained me vanished, replaced by an overwhelming exhaustion. My vision started to blur again, but this time it wasn't from the coma. It's over, Eleanor. It's over. Michael's gentle voice was in my ear. He held my hand tightly. You're safe now. Rick can't touch you anymore. Jenny was sobbing at the foot of the bed, holding my legs. I'm so sorry, Elle. I had no idea you were carrying this all alone. I wanted to smile, but my facial muscles were too tired. I just closed my eyes, letting tears roll onto the pillow. The rain outside was still pouring, but the storm inside my life had just subsided. Still, I knew this wasn't really over. The storm of public opinion was about to begin, but at least for tonight, I was alive. I had won. The echo of Rick's scream, calling me a demon, slowly faded down the long, cold hospital corridor, but its vibration remained in the air, hanging like toxic smoke in the now silent ICU room. His departure, dragged away by police in handcuffs, should have brought me immense relief. I should have felt free, but what I felt instead was a painful emptiness, as if my own bones had been forcibly ripped out along with the man I once considered the final harbor of my life. My body finally gave up. The adrenaline that had burned through my blood, forcing me to stay conscious and fight, was now extinguished. The monitor beside me began to beep with a warning tone again. Not because my heart had stopped, but because its rhythm had become weak and erratic. Eleanor, stay with me, Eleanor. Dr. Evans's voice sounded distant, as if calling from the end of a tunnel. I felt medical hands working quickly on my body. Nurse Jenny injected something into my IV line. A cold sensation spread through my vein and slowly through my body, bringing a heavy drowsiness with it. But I refused to close my eyes. One thing was not yet finished. One more life was at stake in this deadly chess game. Lily, I whispered, my voice barely audible under the oxygen mask that had been placed back over my face. Where's my daughter? Michael, who was checking my pupillary response, paused. His tense face softened. He held my hand, not as a doctor, but as a friend who understood a mother's greatest fear. Lily's safe, Elle. She's at my parents' house for now, with my mom and her nanny, Michael answered gently. I picked her up quietly yesterday evening as soon as I got suspicious of Rick trying to rush you off life support. He has no idea she's there. Tears streamed from the corners of my eyes, soaking the pillow. Thank God. Lily was safe. Rick couldn't use her as a pawn. That monster couldn't touch my little girl. Detective Miller, the officer who had arrested Rick, approached the bed. He seemed awkward in the midst of the intense medical situation, but his duty demanded resolve. He held the plastic bag containing the burner phone, the only weapon I had. Dr. Henderson, Detective Miller said respectfully, I know you need to rest, but I need a brief verbal confirmation to officially secure this evidence. Is it correct that this phone is yours and contains evidence of threats made by Mr. Henderson? I nodded weakly. Yes, that's the proof. Understood. We'll process it immediately. Mr. Henderson will be detained tonight on charges of attempted murder and aggravated domestic battery. Please get some rest. A full statement can be taken once your condition improves. After the detective left, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was no longer one of criminal tension, but the emotional wreckage left by the storm. Nurse Jenny was straightening my blanket with trembling hands. I could see my friend's eyes were swollen. She must have been holding back tears the entire time, trying to stay strong in front of Rick. I was so scared. Elle, Jenny's sobs finally broke through. She hugged my blanket-covered legs. I thought Rick was going to snap and strangle you right in front of us. His eyes, they looked possessed. That's enough, Jen. Let's not talk about it. Let Eleanor sleep, Michael chided gently, though I knew he was still shaken too. News of Rick's arrest spread like wildfire. Even in my semi-conscious state, I could feel the change in the gazes of the night shift nurses who came in to check my IV. There were looks of pity, of shock, and whispers I accidentally caught when the door was slightly ajar. Crazy, right? Dr. Henderson's husband. He was so handsome, always bought us coffee. Heard he had hundreds of thousands in debt. Sports betting. A wave of shame washed over me. For years, I had cultivated an image as a successful neurosurgeon, a career woman with a harmonious family. I covered every bruise with thick foundation and long-sleeved blouses. I covered every one of Rick's debts with my salary and bonuses. I built a beautiful sandcastle so people wouldn't see the hell I was actually living in. And tonight, that sandcastle had been washed away by a brutal wave of truth. Everyone now knew Dr. Henderson wasn't a perfect woman. She was a battered victim. "Elle," Michael called again. He sat in the chair by my bed, looking at me with a deep intensity. The rain outside had softened to a drizzle, tapping a slow rhythm against the window. "You don't need to think about what people are saying. Just focus on recovering. We still have a long road ahead. Rick and his mother won't stay quiet." I looked at Michael. The lines of exhaustion were clear on his face. He had risked his career tonight, lying about going to the pharmacy, calling the police outside of the hospital's rigid bureaucracy, and hiding my child. He did it all for me. "Thank you," I said sincerely. Michael offered a small smile, one he rarely showed at the hospital. "Sleep, Eleanor. Tomorrow is a new day, and this time, you're not alone." The sedative finally won. My consciousness was pulled gently into a dark but peaceful dream world. No more pain, no more of Rick's screams. Just quiet darkness. For the first time in 3 days, I slept not because I was in a coma from blunt force trauma, but because my body knew the threat was gone. But deep down, my instincts whispered that this was only the end of the first act. The real war, the war against public opinion and legal maneuvering, was just about to begin. 2 weeks had passed since that night. I had been moved from the ICU to a private suite in the VIP wing. My body was recovering with surprising speed, at least physically. The bruises had faded to a yellowish tint, and the stitches on my head had healed. But the invisible wounds were fiercely inflamed. That morning, the harsh Chicago sun pierced the blinds of my hospital room. It should have been a bright day, but my mood was dark and heavy. On my lap was a tablet Nurse Jenny had reluctantly loaned me. She had refused at first, but I insisted. I needed to know what was happening out there. I couldn't fight this war blind. And what I saw on that screen made my blood boil. A viral video was circulating on social media, with millions of views. The thumbnail featured the face of Brenda, Rick's stepmother, sobbing her heart out against the backdrop of our luxurious home, a home bought with my sweat and tears. The title was provocative. "A Mother's Heartbreak. Wealthy Doctor Frames Husband for Her Lover." My hand trembled as I pressed play. In the video, Brenda was dressed simply, a stark contrast to her usual glamorous style, and wore no makeup to appear more miserable. "My son, Rick, is a very patient husband," Brenda sobbed for the camera, dabbing at her crocodile tears with a tissue. "It's true he was laid off and wasn't working, but he always tried to make his wife happy. And what did he get in return? Eleanor, my daughter-in-law. She was cheating on him with a colleague, another doctor. When Rick confronted her, Eleanor flew into a rage and fell down the stairs in a hysterical fit. Now she's twisting the facts. She and her lover framed my son so they could be together. Oh God, where is the justice?" The video was dramatically edited, complete with heart-wrenching sad music, and the worst part was the comment section. Thousands of comments from strangers who knew nothing, judging me with words sharper than a scalpel. What an ungrateful woman. Has a handsome husband and still cheats. Of course her doctor boyfriend helped frame him. Check his bank account. Boycott the hospital where she works. Unethical doctors. I feel so bad for his mom. A mother's tears are sacred. That Eleanor is gonna get her karma. I threw the tablet to the end of the bed. My chest felt tight, not from my recovering lungs, but from the vicious slander that was now stripping me bare in front of the entire country. They didn't know Rick beat me. They didn't know he blew my savings on gambling. They only saw the drama. And Brenda was a far more skilled actress than I was. She knew people were easily swayed by an old woman's tears, regardless of the facts. The door to my room opened. Dr. Evans walked in, carrying a tray with oatmeal and a glass of water. He looked refreshed today, but his smile vanished when he saw the look on my face and the tablet lying askew on the bed. "You watched it," he said flatly. "It wasn't a question. How can I rest, Michael?" My voice rose, tears of frustration spilling over. "Look at what they're saying. They're saying I'm having an affair with you, that Rick is innocent. Brenda is twisting everything. My career, my reputation, it's ruined." Michael set the tray down and pulled a chair close. He didn't try to soothe me with empty platitudes. He looked at me with sharp determination. "Listen to me, Eleanor. This is a classic strategy," he said calmly. "Rick's lawyer must have put Brenda up to this. It's called trial by press. They know our legal evidence, the recordings, the video, the medical reports is solid, so they can't win in court. Their only move is to destroy you mentally with public opinion. They want you to get depressed and drop the charges or appear mentally unstable to the judge. But it hurts, Michael. They're insulting us. Let them bark. We have a fatal bite." Michael took out his own phone. "The forensic team just finished recovering data from Rick's laptop they seized from your house. You know what they found? A chat history between Rick and a woman named Cindy. She's Rick's actual mistress. And guess what? Cindy is 4 months pregnant." My world stopped spinning for a moment. "Pregnant?" My voice was choked. "So besides the gambling, he was also—" "Yes. The money you thought was lost to gambling, a large portion of it was funneled to Cindy's apartment in the West Loop," Michael continued. "The police also found proof of transfers from Rick's account to an online bookie right on the day you fell. The motive is clear. He needed your life insurance money to cover his debts and support his pregnant mistress." The news hit me like a sledgehammer. But strangely, this time, it didn't hurt. It was vindicating. This was ammunition. This was proof I wasn't crazy. "We'll save this ace for the trial," Michael said. "Let Brenda run her mouth for now. The higher she flies on her lies, the harder she'll fall when we expose everything." Suddenly, the door opened again. This time, a small figure ran in with cheerful steps, instantly transforming the gloomy room. "Mommy!" "Lily, my little girl." She leaped into my arms without hesitation, burying her face in my neck. The smell of her hair, the familiar scent of baby powder, instantly washed away the stench of medicine and online slander. I held her tight, so tight, as if afraid she would disappear if I let go. "I missed you, Mommy," she whined playfully. "Uncle Michael said you had a headache from working too much. Are you all better now?" I looked into Lily's innocent, round eyes. She didn't know anything about her father. She didn't know he had tried to kill her mother. And I would do anything to protect that innocence for as long as possible. "Mommy's all better now, sweetie." "Because you're here," I replied, kissing her forehead. Michael stood behind Lily, smiling warmly. The presence of both of them gave me a strength no medicine could provide. Brenda could have her thousands of netizens and paid trolls. Rick could have his slick lawyer, but I had the truth. I had Michael. And most importantly, I had a reason to live. "Michael," I called, my voice now much firmer. I wiped the tears from my cheeks. There was no point crying over the comments of strangers. "Yes, Elle, call the best lawyer you know. I'm not backing down. I'm going to drag them all through the hell they created for me. And as for that slander video," I glanced at the still glowing tablet. "We won't respond now. We'll collect every single one of those vicious comments. I'm suing them all for libel after Rick is convicted." Michael broke into a wide, proud grin. "Now that's the Dr. Eleanor Henderson I know. The predator is awake. The storm of slander outside might still be raging, lightning striking my good name. But inside this room, with my daughter and the man who was sincerely protecting me, I felt calm. I was ready for court. I was ready to face those hypocrites. Rick thought he could destroy me. He was dead wrong. He had just created his worst enemy. The day of the trial arrived with a gray, oppressive atmosphere, as if the Chicago sky felt the heavy weight on my chest. The Cook County Courthouse stood imposing with its massive pillars, swarmed by a sea of people. Since Brenda's slander video went viral, my case was no longer just a domestic criminal matter. It had morphed into a public circus, a spectacle where morality was being debated in the court of public opinion. I sat in the back of Dr. Evans's car, wringing my ice-cold hands. Outside, dozens of reporters with cameras at the ready had gathered like ants on sugar. Camera flashes went off like lightning strikes before my feet even touched the pavement. "Ready, Elle?" Michael asked, looking back at me through the rearview mirror. His calm eyes provided a small anchor in the storm. "Ready or not, I have to face it, Michael." "For Lily." "For myself," I replied, trying to convince myself more than him. The moment the car door opened, chaos erupted. Microphones were aggressively shoved in my face, nearly hitting my nose. "Dr. Henderson, what's your response to the cheating allegations from your mother-in-law? Is it true the audio recording was an AI fake? Dr. Evans, what is your actual relationship with the defendant's wife?" The questions were like poisoned arrows, fired relentlessly. I kept my head down, hiding behind dark sunglasses while Michael and our 2 lawyers, Mr. Burhan and his team, painstakingly carved a path through the crowd. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick and stuffy, a mixture of cheap perfume, sweat, and old paper. The room was packed. On the front right side, I saw the opposition. Brenda sat there with her chin held high, dressed in all white with a long headscarf, a stage costume perfectly designed to elicit sympathy from the court. Her face was powdered with light makeup to make her look pale and sorrowful, as if she were the real victim here. And there, in the defendant's chair, sat Rick. He wore a conspicuous orange prison jumpsuit with the number 085 on his chest. His hair, usually styled neatly with expensive pomade, was messy, and he had dark circles under his eyes. Yet when our eyes met, I saw no remorse. I saw a flash of suppressed rage, an arrogance that hadn't been extinguished. He gave me a sharp look, then a thin, crooked smile. A smile that sent a terrifying message. "You think you can win against me? All rise. The court is now in session." The bailiff's voice cut through the tension. 3 raps of the judge's gavel marked the beginning of the battle. The prosecuting attorney, a tough, middle-aged woman named Miss Wallace, read the indictment in a loud, clear voice. She detailed the chronology of the attempted murder with specifics that made my skin crawl: the push down the stairs, the neglect while I was in a coma, the attempt to remove my ventilator. But the real drama began when Rick's defense team took the floor. His lawyer was a Mr. Davies, a portly man with a booming voice and a reputation for doing anything to win, including twisting the facts. "Your Honor." Mr. Davies's voice echoed off the courtroom walls as he paced confidently. "My client, Mr. Rick Henderson, is the victim of a malicious scheme. His wife, the star witness Eleanor Henderson, has a history of severe stress due to the pressures of her job as a neurosurgeon. This inhuman workload led to depression, hallucinations, and self-harming tendencies." I clenched my fists in my lap. "Lies," my mind screamed. "The incident on the stairs," Mr. Davies continued, pointing dramatically at Rick, "was a failed suicide attempt by Miss Henderson. My client tried to stop her but was too late. And as for the ventilator, that was an act of love from a husband who couldn't bear to see his wife suffer as a vegetable. But his good intentions were twisted to cover up the witness's affair with her colleague." His finger shifted to point at Michael, who was sitting in the gallery. A loud murmur rippled through the spectators. A few of Brenda's supporters whispered loudly, sneering at me. "Shameless woman," someone behind me hissed. Then it was my turn to take the witness stand. My heart pounded as if it would leap out of my chest. I swore my oath on the Bible, my hand trembling violently. "Mr. Davies immediately attacked me like a shark smelling blood. "Miss Henderson," he asked in a condescending tone, "is it true you often came home late at night?" "Yes, that's a demand of my profession as a doctor," I answered firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. "And is it true you were often alone with Dr. Evans in the residence lounge?" "That's a public space in the hospital. We were discussing patients." "Discussing patients? Or planning something else?" Mr. Davies cut in. "Be honest, Dr. Henderson. You felt your unemployed husband, Mr. Henderson, was no longer on your level, didn't you? You were ashamed of having an unemployed husband, so you sought comfort in the arms of a more successful man, and then looked for a way to get rid of your husband without the mess of a divorce and splitting your assets?" "Objection, Your Honor," Miss Wallace shouted. "Counsel's questions are speculative and are badgering the witness." "I'm merely exploring motive, Your Honor," Davies countered with a sly grin. I took a deep breath, looking straight at the judge. "Your Honor, I was never ashamed of a husband who was struggling. I was ashamed of having a husband who stole his own daughter's college fund to gamble and then tried to murder his wife when he was caught." Davies laughed mockingly. "Gambling? Where's the proof? That's just a baseless accusation." "We have the proof," Miss Wallace interjected calmly. Your Honor, we request permission to play the legally obtained electronic evidence, an audio recording from the victim's phone just before the incident, hospital security footage, and forensic data from the defendant's laptop. Rick's previously calm face grew tense. He whispered frantically to Davies, but his lawyer could only stand silently as the judge approved the motion. The courtroom fell completely silent. As the technician played the first audio file, a crackling sound filled the room. Then came Rick's voice, clear, cruel, unfiltered. "Sign it or die, Eleanor. Sign these asset transfer papers now." The sound of a loud slap, smack. Then, my muffled cry. "When you're gone, I get the insurance payout. $2 million, Eleanor. That's more than enough to pay off my gambling debts and live comfortably with my mother. So, what's it going to be? Die slowly? Or sign it now?" The entire courtroom gasped. The murmurs turned into a wave of shock. The faces in the gallery that had been looking at me with scorn were now pale. The voice was so real, so sadistic, a complete contradiction to the patient husband image Rick had built on social media. Rick looked down, his hands gripping his knees. Cold sweat poured down his temples. That's a deepfake! AI! Rick suddenly shouted, jumping to his feet. "She's a doctor. She's smart. She could make anything." "The defendant will be seated," the judge barked. "If the defendant denies the audio," Miss Wallace said with a small, triumphant smile, "let's look at the visual evidence. This is a video the victim secretly recorded from a closet while the defendant was on the phone. The video played on a large projector screen. Rick was seen pacing in our bedroom, a cigarette dangling from his lips, his face furious. "Don't worry, man. My wife is taken care of. The stairs in our house get slippery when wet. A little push. Domestic accident. The cops will never suspect a thing. The payout comes through next week. I promise." Silence. This time it was a horrified silence. But our attack wasn't over. Miss Wallace had saved the final bomb to destroy Brenda's credibility and the cheating wife motive they had constructed. "Your Honor," Miss Wallace continued, "the defense accuses the victim of having an affair. However, the data recovered from the defendant's laptop reveals the opposite. We submit as evidence bank transfers from the defendant's account to a Miss Cindy Alia, as well as photographs of them together." The projector screen changed. A list of bank transfers appeared, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 6 months, money I had worked day and night to earn, money meant for Lily's future. And the final devastating blow was the last photo. Rick with his arm wrapped lovingly around a young woman in a lavish apartment. The woman wore a tight dress that accentuated her pregnant belly. Mr. Henderson used money extorted from his wife and planned to use her life insurance payout to finance another woman who is currently carrying his child from their illicit affair, Miss Wallace stated firmly. The courtroom erupted. "Son of a bitch!" a man in the back shouted. But the most chilling reaction came from Brenda. The old woman's face was ashen, as if all the blood had been drained from it. Her eyes widened, staring at the screen, then shifting to her stepson with a look of utter disbelief. For Brenda, money was God. To see family money funneled to another woman was the ultimate betrayal. "Rick," Brenda's voice trembled, cutting through the chaos. "Is this true? You said that money was for a mining business venture. You said Eleanor was the one spending recklessly." Rick couldn't answer. He shrank further in his seat, his shoulders shaking. He knew he was finished. His masks, devoted son, wronged husband, had been smashed to pieces in front of his mother, the law, and the entire country. "Mr." Davies wiped his face with a handkerchief, looking defeated. He knew the case was lost. "Enough!" Rick suddenly screamed hysterically, his voice shattering like glass. He kicked the table in front of him, sending it toppling over. "Yes, I did it! Are you happy now? It's all because of her!" Rick pointed a trembling finger at me, his eyes red and wet with tears of rage and desperation. "She was stingy. She had a 6-figure salary but made her husband beg like a charity case. I'm the husband, the head of the household. Her money should have been my money. I was just taking what was mine. If she had just died, all my problems would be solved. My debts paid, Cindy taken care of, and I wouldn't have to listen to her nagging anymore. The confession echoed through every corner of the room, recorded by every camera, heard by God. It was the most honest and most disgusting admission that could have come from his mouth. He didn't regret trying to kill me. He only regretted failing. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly to restore order. Security officers wrestled the rampaging Rick back into his chair. The rest of the trial was a blur to me. I could only weep silently, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming emotional release. In the gallery, Michael looked at me and nodded slowly, giving me strength. 2 weeks later, the day of the verdict arrived. I stood as the judge read the decision in a deep, authoritative baritone. On the charges of attempted murder, aggravated domestic battery, and fraud, this court finds the defendant, Rick Henderson, guilty on all counts. Considering the lack of mitigating factors, as the defendant has shown no remorse and has instead defamed the victim, the judge paused, the entire room holding its breath. This court sentences the defendant to a term of 18 years in state prison. 18 years. The gavel came down once, hard. Thwack. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard, more melodic than any symphony. Rick went limp, as if the bones had been removed from his body. He slumped in his chair, his gaze empty. In the front row, Brenda fainted and had to be carried out by relatives, a final, tragic act from a greedy woman. As the guards led him away in handcuffs, Rick turned to look at me as we passed in the hallway. There was no more arrogance in his eyes, only a dark, hollow fear. He had lost everything: his freedom, his money, his mistress, who I later heard had fled with his remaining assets, and his dignity. I stared back at him without pity, without fear. "Enjoy what you've sown, Rick," I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. Rick was dragged away, disappearing behind the door to the holding cells. I stepped out of the courthouse. The sun was shining brilliantly, breaking through the gray clouds that had been hanging overhead. The polluted Chicago air felt fresh in my lungs. The storm had passed. The predator was caged. And I was free. The first morning after the verdict felt strange. I woke up as the early sun broke through a gap in the curtains, blinding me. For a few seconds, panic seized me. My heart raced, and my hand frantically patted the other side of the bed, terrified I would find Rick's body there, smell his stale cigarette smoke, hear his angry snarl. But the space beside me was empty, cold, and quiet. Slowly, reality seeped into my consciousness. Rick was gone. He was in Stateville Correctional Center, sleeping on a cold concrete floor, not this king-sized mattress. I exhaled a long, deep breath, feeling oxygen fill my lungs without the familiar tightness of fear. But a victory in court is not an instant cure. My physical wounds may have healed, the stitches on my head were gone, but the wounds in my soul were still wide open. For the first month, I often woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat, hearing footsteps on the stairs, or dreaming of being pushed into a dark abyss. I still felt like I was being watched. Healing is not linear. There were days I felt incredibly strong, like I could conquer the world. But there were other days I could only curl up under the covers, crying for no reason, feeling dirty and stupid for having loved a monster like Rick for so many years. "Why didn't I see it sooner, Michael?" I asked one afternoon during an informal therapy session with him at a quiet coffee shop. "I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to be an expert diagnostician. Why was I so blind to the sickness in my own marriage?" Michael stirred his coffee slowly, looking at me with patience. He never judged me. "Because you loved him, Elle. And manipulators like Rick are experts at hiding the symptoms. Never blame the victim. He was the one who was sick, not you." My first big step toward healing was leaving that luxurious house, the one that had been a silent witness to every slap, every insult, every tear. I sold it. I didn't care about the fake happy memories that once existed there. I used the money from the sale to pay off the remaining debts Rick had taken out in my name, wiping the slate clean. With the rest, I bought a modest house in the quiet suburb of Evanston. My new home was much smaller, a single-story ranch with a large grassy yard and a maple tree out front. But this house had something Rick's palace never did: peace. Its walls held no memories of shouting. Its floors were never stained with my blood. It was a blank canvas. Here, I began to piece my life back together with Lily. Lily, my little girl, now 6 years old, was my biggest reason to keep going. The trauma had left its mark on her. She had become quiet and fearful of loud noises. But slowly, her cheerful laughter began to return. "Mommy, look! A butterfly!" she shouted one morning, running barefoot across the lawn. Seeing her laugh so freely warmed my heart. We were safe now. A year passed. I decided not to return to full-time work at the elite hospital where I used to practice. There were too many pitying stares, too many whispers in the hallways that made me uncomfortable. Instead, I used my remaining savings and part of the restitution seized from Rick's hidden assets to bring a long-buried dream to life. I rented a 2-story commercial space not far from my new home. A simple but meaningful sign was installed out front: the Phoenix Center for Survivors, counseling and medical aid for victims of domestic violence. This wasn't just a job. This was a monument to my survival. I recruited Nurse Jenny as the operations manager. My loyal friend resigned from the hospital the moment I offered her the position. We partnered with several pro bono lawyers and psychologists. It wasn't easy at first. Many people were dismissive. Why would a specialist start a charity? "There's no money in it," some of my former colleagues scoffed, but I didn't care. The satisfaction of seeing a woman find the courage to report her abusive husband or seeing a child finally sleep soundly without fear was far more valuable than the large salary I used to hand over to Rick. One of my first clients was a young mother named Nia. She came in with a bruised face, just like I used to have. She cried, saying her husband was a prominent figure in the community and she was afraid no one would believe her. I held her hand and looked deep into her eyes. "I believe you, Nia. The world might look away, but here you are heard. We will fight this. I will stand with you." 3 months later, when Nia finally won full custody of her child and was free from her husband, the hug she gave me was more healing than any therapy I had ever undergone. I realized that by healing others, I was slowly healing myself. And in the midst of my new, busy life, one person remained a constant, calm presence, like a patient harbor waiting for a storm-tossed ship. Dr. Michael Evans. He never pushed. He never declared his love with grand gestures or saccharine words. His love showed in small things. Bringing Lily's favorite donuts on weekends, fixing a leaky faucet at the center, sitting with me in silence on my porch when I was exhausted. One night, a heavy rain fell in Evanston. We were sitting in my living room. Lily was fast asleep in her room. Michael had just helped me finish writing a grant proposal for the center. "Aren't you tired, Michael?" I asked suddenly, breaking the quiet filled by the sound of the rain. Driving back and forth from Chicago to Evanston, taking care of a traumatized single mom. Michael put down his pen. He looked at me, his calm gaze always managing to make my heart flutter. "Elle, I'm never tired if the destination is you. I've waited years to see you happy, to see you smile freely like you do now. That's more than enough to cover the gas money." My eyes welled up. I thought of Rick, who always calculated the profit and loss in our relationship, who always demanded to be served. And now, here was a man who gave without asking, who loved without conditions. "I'm still broken, Michael," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm afraid to start over. I'm afraid I'll choose wrong again." Michael shifted closer, but still kept a respectful distance. He didn't touch me, but his presence felt incredibly close. "You're not broken, Eleanor. You're renovating. And I'm a very patient contractor. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow or next month. I'm just asking for permission to stay here, to be with you until the renovations are complete." Tears streamed down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion. I nodded slowly. "Don't go anywhere, okay?" Michael smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Our lives settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. I heard news about Rick from my former lawyer. In prison, without money to bribe the guards, Rick became an easy target for other inmates. With his status as a wife-beater, he was at the bottom of the prison hierarchy. He was often sick, rail-thin, and looked much older than his age. His mother, Brenda, had lost everything, and was now living with distant relatives in a small town, ignored by the socialites she once worshipped. Karma was real. It didn't come with explosive vengeance, but with a cold, quiet justice. I no longer hated them. Hate was exhausting. I just felt a distant pity, and then I forgot them. They were a closed chapter in my past. That afternoon, I was sitting on the porch of the center after all the staff had gone home. The evening sky was painted in shades of gold and orange, a canvas of hope. Lily was drawing at a small table beside me. She was drawing 3 people, me, her, and a tall man with glasses holding our hands. "Is that Uncle Michael?" I asked, stroking her hair. Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Yep. When is Uncle Michael going to be my daddy? My friends at school get picked up by their daddies. I want that too." I laughed softly and looked toward the gate. Michael's car had just pulled into the driveway. He got out, waving with his signature wide smile, holding a bag of donuts. The afternoon sun at his back made him seem to glow. I picked up my phone and opened the front-facing camera, not to record evidence of a crime as I once did with the phone from Locker 303. This time, I wanted to record happiness. I wanted to share my story, to show that even after the darkest night, the sun will always rise again. "Hello, everyone," I said to the camera, my smile full and genuine. "Thank you for following my long journey from rock bottom to today." Locker 303 held a dark secret that nearly ended my life. But from that darkness, I learned to create my own light. The storm has passed now. And for those of you who might be in the same situation I was, please don't give up. You are valuable. You are strong. And believe me, happiness is waiting for you just around the corner. I turned the camera toward Lily, who was running to hug Michael. That sight, my daughter and the man who loved her as his own, was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. My life was no longer a tragedy. It was a story of triumph.